First of all, thank you very much. First of all, I would really like to thank the Let's Vision OS organization for having us. It's my first time in Asia. It's nice to have Beijing, to have the honor to be the first city to visit in Asia. So today, I'm going to talk about designing spatial apps. So you just heard from Jordi, like how to generate ideas, how to try and error. I'm going to give some tips on how you can make those ideas look nicely and make it feel nicely and actually know how to use it. So to start off, I'll start with a little introduction. My name is Hidde. It's spelled and pronounced like hidden without the N. It's a very weird Dutch name. You won't hear it any more than today, I think, because even in the Netherlands it's not very common. So I'm an Amsterdam-based designer turned indie app developer. I have designed apps for over 15 years, and I, at some point, didn't want to be depending on a developer, so I taught myself how to program. So this is not a Dutch conference, and I know I'm the second speaker, and the second speaker from Amsterdam. I promise you one thing, Amsterdam is small, but not that small. Jordi and I are actually quite good friends. So we share an office in Amsterdam. You saw me in some of his videos in the background as well. He always disturbs me while I'm working, pinching around on lights and stuff. But anyway, it's so nice for us to be here together. Our whole office is empty in Amsterdam, so I hope no one breaks in. Like I said, I also make apps for a living. They're completely different. I currently have 6 in the App Store. They're all, I always find it very difficult to answer like what apps you're working on because they're literally all over the place. One of them is a kite surfing app for the Apple Watch, which is now featured on the Apple Watch page on apple.com. One of them is a ChatGPT app for Apple Watch and iPhone, which was one of the top selling apps in America at some point. I have a goal tracking app and a music app, which I will tell about more later. There's actually another app coming very soon that I just announced. It's called Helm. Helm will be hopefully fixing the experience that we have with App Store Connect. It's going to be a native Mac app for App Store Connect because if you ship a lot of updates as a developer, you know how painful it can be sometimes to go through the website. But this is the app I'll be referencing to a lot as an example. I'll give some examples on what my train of thought is when I design apps for Apple Vision Pro and what I learned along the way. It's called Now Playing, and it's basically your ultimate music companion. I'm a big music nerd. I love getting into facts of albums and artists. And it's you can find all these fun facts about songs, like what awards did they win, where was it recorded, where does the artist come from, even some cool hip-hop references out here and there. You can, to make it more visual, you could also place a window in your environment somewhere, and it will continuously update with whatever music's playing from wherever using Shazam. So if you watch a film, and you think, hey, this song is really cool, and you'll just look at the window of Now Playing, and you can add it to your library. I worked hard on this for the months since Apple Vision Pro was announced. It was well received, so well that Apple also mentioned it in its official press release for Apple Vision Pro apps, which was a really nice humble brag, and it's always nice to get see your work being acknowledged. So enough about me. We're here to design apps. So the thing is, like Jordi mentioned as well, the Apple Vision Pro is such a new platform, and we have been designing interfaces for years and years, but the spatial computing era brings a whole set of new challenges, but also a lot of familiarities if you do it right. So I want to get one thing out of the way. I'm not going to talk about immersive experiences. That's a whole other topic on its own, and I'm pretty sure there's plenty of other speakers here this weekend that can do a way better job at telling more about this than I can. I have touched it here and there, I played around with it, but I think it's nice to focus on just the basics. And when I talk about basics, I'm going to tackle 2 main topics. One of them is content. Content is something that every app has. It can be video, can be photo, but it can also be list or information. It can be text that you read, just basically the basic content of your app. And then, of course, you can't have an app without navigation because, yeah, otherwise it's just the picture, really, isn't it? So the content is what should you consider when you show content? Like, what's the best way for visionOS apps to show content? And navigation will basically how you design an app that's easy to navigate and will help guide the user. So let's start with content. The first thing that I noticed when I started designing the first visionOS app is like you really need to avoid opaque colors. And with opaque colors, I mean having, well, unless you are a black curtain app, I guess, this is normally a no-go unless it's your app idea, but in general, it's really a bad idea to have solid colors for your app because everything is in your space. So like you already said, it really blocks a light. If everything would be an opaque color, it could cause like a claustrophobia effect if you're not being careful. We have used background colors for years as a way of branding, as a way of feel to an app. Luckily, you don't have to lose it. You can just whack it on there with a little bit of opacity and you still get a little hint of your branding. But the main thing is everything is made of glass now. Luckily, not the type of glass that breaks if you knock on it too hard, but everything is made of glass, and the glass effects all adapt on your user's surroundings. So if the light gets darker, the glass gets darker. And luckily, Apple was so kind enough to make it really easy to make something of glass. I wish the real life glass was this easy, because now it's just one single line of code and wham, you have a glass thingy. And as soon as you put it in a window, even if you do show a photo or a video which is okay to block the view, then it's a nice way to try to keep some focus. Like, it's very easy to be distracted if it's floating around somewhere. And a really great way to keep focus on your content is by dimming the environment. This is basically the visionOS version of dark mode in a way. So by dimming the environment, it eases the eye, it calms the environment a little bit, and it's a very nice and smooth, easy way to read and adopt the content. And also, like honestly, my slides are maximum one line of code each, because I'm still a designer by heart and I don't like writing code, so I have to make things work. But it's just one line of code again. It's either system dark or nothing. There's no system light because I don't know, actually. I think it's the Apple decided to not want to have light mode in there, as in dimming. Also, dimming doesn't work well if you make it light. So, but back to content. We're back to content. You have content. If you have an existing app, you already have content. If you make a new app, you have ideas of where to get content from. We're not on a small device anymore. We're now everywhere in the spatial. So let's try to rethink how can we make this content a bit more rich, a bit more fun, a bit more in your surrounding. For example, I told you earlier, in my Now Playing app, I show to the user if an artist or a song has won some awards. I have these flat icons that I use on the iPad, an iPhone version. I could use this, of course, in the spatial app, but that's a bit boring, isn't it? So the first thing I did was make 3D models of these. Making something 3D is quite hard, but if you get it right, it enriches your experience dramatically. It's in this case, the user now can view the award, the real life-size award, look around, put it on their desk if they want to try to be like a pop star. I don't know about you, but I have never seen a Grammy or an Oscar or any of the Brit Awards in real life. So this is the closest thing we get, unless we're really good singers, which I doubt. But like you already said, there's a lot of great resources. TurboSquid is really a good one. It's already really difficult to make 2D visuals. Never mind 3D. I'm not a 3D artist. I tried. It's hard. Luckily, there's tools like Spline coming, and I thought that one of the sponsors was an AI 3D tool. It looked really cool. Luckily, other smart people are working on solutions to let people like me get to create 3D content. But it's just to give you some impression, like try to think like what in my app can I confirm to or transform to a 3D experience to make it feel more real and to be able to walk around things. So another example was this. I have these alternative app icons. I think there are 36 of them now on the iPad, which is a lot. But basically, to give a bit of context, you unlock them by having some fun tasks. So you listen to 5 songs that have the word blue in it. You get a blue icon. Listen to a certain album or so many songs from the night. Anyway, you get the point. I didn't want to lose this in my Vision app because I think it's a very, I don't think, I know my users love this feature because it's a gamification of my app. However, Vision OS doesn't have alternative app icons yet, at least. So I was thinking, what can I do to still have this gamification and not just say, congratulations, you unlocked an image of an alternative app icon that you can't do anything with. That sounds a bit like, it's a bit anticlimactic. So I have never won an award yet for my apps. Maybe one day, I hope. So I made a simple 3D model. This is as far as my 3D skills go. It's just a cube. I made a simple 3D model of an award. It's inspired by the App Store Award. And then with every trophy you unlock, I whack the app icon as on the front as like a texture, and I change the color material of the model as we go because I found out you can change a lot of your 3D models in code as you show them. And I think it's a lot more fun if you can actually put something somewhere and pretend that you won awards. So why is this 3D such a big deal in spatial computing? Everything what you do in Vision OS lives in your physical space. And if you think about it, in real life, everything around you has some form of depth. There's nothing that's 100% thin. So by using depth, you can create a more realistic experience. You can create a more richer experience. Especially for content, this is a really powerful tool. So it also brings a new way to create hierarchy. Hierarchy is the way how a layout is balanced, and depth is one that we had never had before. And luckily, here goes again, one line of code. There's a new padding called padding 3D, and then if you whack it on a view, the view pops out of the main window, basically. This is very easy to do, but comes with a bit of a caveat. You need to keep depth a bit subtle. And what do I mean with that? Is over time, if you use depth on everything, things can break a little bit, but it also can be quite tiring for your user. So one example is like if you hold your hands like this, and you look at your right hand, and then to your left hand, your eyes have to refocus. So this is also the case with Vision OS. So if something has a different depth, if it's a bit more than a certain threshold, then your eyes have to refocus. And refocusing your eyes all the time, I don't know if you've ever driven a car when the sun is setting, it's very tiring for your eyes, and you have to work extra hard for every interaction you do. So that's what I mean with try to keep depth subtle. Another fun side effect is that your UI can break really fast. On the left one, I just have a normal rectangle, and on the right, I added that single line of code called the padding 3D. And you can see immediately that you don't get the fancy looking blur effect when you navigate because now the rectangle lives above the navigation bar. So I think when you use the padding 3D, try to only do it when it's a static view or when it's like a visual and you want to really like bow in your face, sell something to your user or express some emotion to your user. Then if you look at the UI of Apple Vision Pro, there's a few things that stand out. And one of them we already covered, which is the glass. Like everything has to work in your environment. But the other thing is that it's the most rounded OSs of maybe of history, at least from Apple so far. It's the most rounded OS. So if anything, round those corners. Start with a rounded rectangle, ditch the normal rectangle. It's a better way to start. And the reason why this is the case is that, as you can see here, if you look at it long enough, is that the square rectangle is distracting you from the original message because it stands out too much and it doesn't flow nicely within the views. So on the left side is what the recommended way is, and you start flowing nicely to the button, and it blends nicely with the view. A little fun designer trick that helps a lot is when you doubt what corner radius to use, because I know it's always difficult. There's a good rule of thumb to do like an outer radius minus gap is the inner radius. This works 90% of the time, but I would advise to practice this and keep practice. Train your feel for rounded corners. Basically, should be a skill on LinkedIn, really. If anyone wants an endorsement on LinkedIn for rounded corners, I'll happily do that. Then we talk about scale of content. The scale of content is also a new challenge we face, because the only scale that we have is like, oh yeah, it's a slightly bigger screen size. It's either an iPad 12-inch or an iPad 10-inch, or it's an iPhone. It's slightly bigger, right? Well, with visionOS, you can make it as big as you want. So there's no more limitations. Well, there's some limitations, of course, but let's pretend there's no limitation to how big you want it. And therefore, the scale of your content matters more than ever before. And to give you some guidance in how big should a window be, I will highlight 3 different scale sizes, and each scale size has a different purpose. First, you have the small scale. Everything in real life, every physical object that's small feels more personal, lightweight, and easy to interact with. A great example is the Apple Watch, right? It's the tiniest device that you can have from Apple, and it's right there on your wrist, but it's also nice and tiny and cute. And therefore, it feels very light. Also, it's simple as a mouse feels different than an elephant, basically. So this is great for if you have small interaction, like the example from your with the lights. If you would have like a big light switch the size of an elephant, it would not feel nicely. You just need a quick interaction. So you want lightweight interaction, make things small. The opposite of that is the large one, of course, which makes things very heavy and is difficult to get right. I would always advise to start playing around with the default window size if you have a visionOS app. See what feels right. Like, make it small, make it tiny, make it big. But in general, if you make a massive window, it's really good to do that when you want to impress with the content you have. So if you have like a really cool video or a really big, nice, big image, or you just don't want the user to be able to ignore it, then make it as large as you want. And then the last one is, I touched base on it a little bit, but that's the real life size. And that's something, with the award, for example, you don't want the award to be the size of this room, right? You want to experience the award because you don't have access to the real award. So you want this experience, like what's it like being there? Like with the rockets, you want to see the scale of the rocket. You don't want a tiny little rocket on the floor to be able to step on it, because that's not why you are in spatial computing. And with every single content, you can really ask yourself, what size fits this content the most? But now we know about scale, we know about the background colors, we know about all the fun, finicky things. You can't talk about content without talking about typography. I know, I'm sorry, it's a difficult topic. but we cannot ignore it. The thing with typography for Vision OS is that it comes with a new set of challenges for legibility. So in general, make things bolder is the main takeaway. Apple themselves have made every single default style of text a bit bolder, and the reason is simple: legibility. If text is a bit bolder, in general it's a bit easier to read, and especially when it lives in a physical space, it's easier to read on a distance and close by. So if you use a regular weight in your iOS app, bump it up to medium, etc., etc., etc. This is mainly for if you use custom fonts, because lucky enough, if you use the default styles of the default text styles of Vision OS, like any of these, doesn't not only body, we even got 2 new ones, yes, extra large and extra large 2. But if you use any of the default styles, a lot has been taken care of for you. Accessibility, legibility, kerning, all the fancy typography slang words that there exist, Apple have taken care of it. So you don't have to. Now, I know what you're thinking. Does this make my app look like all the other apps? Maybe that's more designer thoughts for the designers in here. You might thought that, but the good thing is these days it's not only the default anymore. We can change the width of the font. We can change the design of the font. So you have compressed, condensed, standard, expanded, default, rounded, monospace, serif. There's so many options now in the fonts, and it's so easy to add that even with these variation in fonts, you can have completely different feels. This is all San Francisco. The same font with just different design types and different font widths. So there's still plenty of space to play around with getting a unique brand going on. But we were still in Vision OS, so things are in space. Text should almost always be flat. I say almost always because if you use it for just visual purposes, as in like an illustration or, pretty much just don't care about legibility, it's just a nice visual look, then you can make text 3D. It's a bit, you can compare it a little bit between like the signs outside of a window from a shop compared to the text in a book, right? You don't want text in a book to be all fancy unless it's a children's book maybe. But the signage is more about acknowledging a brand and showing a brand. The same counts for text in Vision OS. So keep text flat to keep the legibility going. And an personal experience I have with typography for Vision OS was a really fun one, is that text will look so much smaller in the simulator than it does on the device. The first time I went to Apple Vision Pro Lab in London, I thought, wow, I upped the font size quite a bit because it looked tiny in the simulator. It's like, no one can read this. This is not good. I expected better from Apple. And then I went to the lab. I opened it on the device, and it was like, wow, it was way too big. So when in doubt, if you use custom fonts, if you change size of custom fonts, compare them to the basic default styles in the simulator, because if they're similar in size there, then you should be good. Asterisk, because there can always be some weird going on. But sizing in simulator is completely off for typography, unfortunately. Then the last topic for content that I want to tackle is hover states. Hover states have been around us for a while. I think it goes back to the early Mac days, of course. But I would like to say, I think hover states has never been as important for any OS as it is for Vision OS. And your eyes simply won't recognize what you can tap on, what you can use, if a button or something that you can interact with doesn't have hover state. You can, in the simulator, you can think it's fine, but you're always biased because you know what you can tap on as a developer. And next to that, you also have a cursor, your mouse in the simulator, so it feels different, right? It's not like looking at something, it's dragging a cursor to something. If you're on the device, literally everything is controlled with your eyes. And therefore, if something does not highlight while you look at it, you think it's just normal text, you think it's just a normal image. So I would like to dare say that, therefore I like to dare say that hover states are the most important thing that is new for VisionOS. And when you do, take care of padding, make sure that your target, tap target is big enough. For years it has been 44 points by 44 points, the magic number for iOS and iPad. Now they upped it to 60 points, and I think it's because of the accuracy of eye tracking is slightly different than the accuracy of a touchscreen. Doesn't mean your buttons have to be 60 points big, because that's too big again, so make it still 44 points, but add like 8 points of padding around it, then you can do the math, and it's 60, I think, yeah. So here's an example for a hover state with album artwork. You can see also that I nicely matched my quarter radius with the outer quarter radius, but it feels a lot more natural if you have a little bit spacing about the thing you can interact with. And if you do, please make sure to add some padding between the hover states, because otherwise it starts to look like a sandwich. Unfortunately, even though it's so important, the styling of hover states is quite limited still. The reason for this is very simple, I think. Privacy, of privacy, if you're from the UK. I think they're used on macOS and iPadOS. You have like a .on hover, if you're familiar with it. With VisionOS, you can only use the content shape on the hover effect. And I think it's, with privacy, I mean that Apple doesn't want anyone to be able to track where the user is looking at outside of their app. And I think, especially unless you're in an immersive environment, they want to limit it. I hope they will come up with a nice privacy-friendly way to style more hover effects, but so far we're limited to highlighting or lifting, basically. So, we talked about content. Now let's navigate to navigation. So, Jordi already said it a little bit with the window management. It's a bit hard. I think what most people did as soon as they started creating a VisionOS app is putting everything in Windows. Literally, spatial does not mean everything has to be in Windows. And it's exactly what Jordi said about window management. When you close the wrong one, you're basically messed up and you're stuck in an endless loophole. So be very careful in when you open a new window. Also, next to that, windows do get lost in space. I always wanted to use that effect, actually. Can we do it one more time? Yes. Finally found a reason. Thank you, VisionOS. It gets better, wait. Oof. So yeah, what do we mean when windows get lost in space? Basically, windows stay where you place them. I could work on my taxes on VisionOS while I'm on the toilet. I put the window of my taxes there. I leave the room. I go to my dinner table, and I forgot about my taxes. I don't know where it is anymore. It got lost. And that's just one window. But if you have multiple windows for multiple apps, you could have land in a scenario where your main app window is somewhere completely different from your little side hustle. So, yeah, Windows, be careful. Open them when needed, but also make sure to tackle some window management. Like adding a button to open the main window back is always a good backup plan. And we'll see what they will bring during WWDC this year, I guess. Ornaments is another new fancy new thing to use for navigation. And if we quote the Human Interface Guideline, an ornament presents controls and information related to a window without crowding or obscuring the window's content. So, fancy words. I want to highlight two of these words, which will explain the same thing, really. And that's when ornaments are for two things, and two things only, for controls and for information. If we look at the Apple Music app on visionOS, see they use a nice big picture because they want to have the content forward. And you look at the ornament, you can split it up in those two topics. The middle is information, what's currently playing, where are we in the song. And then on the side you have controls, like I want to play the next song, I want to pause this one, I want to change the volume. So for me, I did something similar for the song display window. Like I said, this window continuously updates. I explicitly choose for the ornaments to be on top. Normally it's recommended to be at the bottom or the side, and the reason is because it's harder to look up than to look down. So again, with the cost efficiency of your own energy, having your ornament at the bottom is always, most of the time, better. I choose to go on the top here because I don't want the ornaments to be blocking any of the content, and at the bottom we also have the drag bar, so I didn't want to block it, the drag bar. However, if you press the view lyrics, it opens another ornament right on the side. Ornaments can be as big as you want. That's very risky of Apple to do, because you could potentially make another app next to your own app as an ornament. However, you cannot control the ornament as much as your main view. Another example is for my paywall. I didn't want to. I wanted a no crap paywall. So here's the options, and then here's what's included. It's again, in this case, it's information, right? So no controls, just information. The good thing about navigation for visionOS is that we don't have to reinvent everything. It's nice. It's nice to be able to use knowledge that we already own in something that's so futuristic. So in most cases, you'll be right off if you keep the navigation patterns the same. We have the navigation link with the master details view. We even have a tab bar which still shows you all the icons in one go, and it even looks fancy, fancier than any tab bar I've seen in my life. So when in doubt, please do not reinvent the wheel with some magical new navigation pattern. Try to keep it simple, and your users will always know where to find things. So we covered a lot. There's a whole lot more to cover if you would have an infinite amount of time, but we don't. So I'll leave you with one more bonus tip and then a tiny sort of bonus note, I guess. So the bonus tip is, if you do, I did mention the simulator is still the way to go for most of us, if we're honest, because the device is only in the States for now. So if you work with the simulator and you want to experience the navigation a little bit better than with your cursor, then get yourself a controller. It doesn't have to be Xbox. I have an Xbox, so I just showed an Xbox controller here, but it could be any controller that's compatible with macOS. And as soon as you connect that, you can walk through the rooms on the controller, which is a lot nicer than with your keyboard. And as a last bonus note, this is my favorite shortcut in Xcode. Does anyone know what this shortcut does? No? Yes? It opens my favorite website, the Human Interface Guidelines. So, this is my Bible. I go to sleep reading this. I wake up reading this. I read it with coffee. I read it with soup. Maybe not soup, but you get it. Every now and then, please just press that shortcut, even if it's accidentally. Just press it every now and then and read through one section. They update it more often than any time before. It used to come in a little iBook every once in a year, but now they update it every month almost. It's really nice, and it really will help you create better app experiences. So now you know how to build, how to design some apps. You know what to build. there's only one thing left to do for everyone, and that's just to have fun. So thank you very much. Shishi.
Thanks, Heather. Awesome. So I think there's a question from some of our developers is like people see you build a bunch of apps and also like experimenting new stuff. So how did you spend your time on maybe maintaining the current services? Because like maybe maintenance can be time consuming.
Yeah.
And also spend your time developing pretty new features. How did you balance these?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a question.
Okay. It's very simple. I mainly work on whatever I like. what I think having fun is the most, that's why I ended my slides with have fun. Having fun is the most important thing. And if you keep your app simple, then it's not often that things will break fast, right? And you build them from a passion that you have yourself. So it's really nice to be able to switch contexts and be able to switch different apps. So to answer this question is by having fun in all the apps you build, really. And hope if things break really badly, of course, you go full throttle red alert on that app and fix it. But realistically, there's not a lot that can go wrong, really, if you keep things simple. Hope that answers it.